What is happening? What is going on? Today is Wednesday. This is the first time we've had a video on Wednesday, so what up, everyone? Not gonna lie, so this is kind of embarrassing, but I'll tell you anyways. I have like a really decent microphone on here, and I kept on getting like this terrible audio quality, and I kept on like messing with my mic till I realized it was backwards today. So my bad. So hopefully this audio quality is a little bit better for y'all. But today we are talking about the war on the home front. So I know we said we would go to the Russian Revolution today, but I thought it might be important for us to actually like look at what was going on the home front of the war. So yesterday we talked about how it was a war of attrition and how people at home had to kind of live that total war lifestyle. So a lot of the war was fought outside of the trenches. And I really wanted to emphasize this, and I think that we really need to look at how it was fought outside of the trenches and how people actually made a difference in the lives of these soldiers and how countries had to adapt to this war. So let's go ahead and take a look at that today, and then we'll move on to Russia tomorrow. I promise that will be soon. But let's first look at the war on the home front. So we're just going to look at a series of pictures. I'm going to explain what's going on, just like a normal video. So let's get going. So first thing we're going to look at is industrialization and like the takeover of the factories by each country to produce more weapons for war. And this wasn't just like a, hey, I've got a factory, you want to use it? It was the actual country saying, hey, you have a factory, we are now going to equip it to become a factory for tanks or a factory for shells or a factory for whatever they may have needed at that point in time. So the government definitely needed to produce equipment, and they took over the economy too. So not only did they take over what was going on in the factories, they also took over the actual economy of the country. So they made it so that there was almost zero unemployment. So if you were on the streets and not working, they said you had to work. You had to go into working and becoming one of these factory workers, even if you were a woman, which at this point in time was kind of unclassy for women to be working. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But I think that not only did they take over the economy, but they allowed other people's economies to flourish, especially the United States. Their economy is going to do super well because they wait so long to get into the war that they are just trading and trading and trading with these countries that are doing war. And it is making it so that they can make these huge profit margins because these countries are pretty desperate. The next thing is just some more pictures of different factories that were being taken over. So you'll notice most of these are making bombs or making shells. I love that we're in this era where we can actually look at pictures now, because these really describe what was going on at this point in time. These women and gentlemen that weren't working or that were older or too young, they were all being put into these factories to bolster the war effort. So the next thing that we're going to talk about is conscription. So this really goes along with our discussion post for this week. So if you haven't done that, go ahead and check out that discussion post. It's a really good one. Some really good conversations going on in that. So go check that out. But what conscription is really a draft or a military draft, or a lottery is another word for this military draft. So at first, men were volunteering. So they were volunteering at the very beginning of the war, thinking that it was going to be a super quick war and being patriots and having like this war mentality that they should join. But by 1916, like pretty much everyone had stopped joining the war because they saw it as pretty much suicide by going to the war because so many people were dying. So if you look at this graph over here on the left, you can see that just the amount of troops that were needed to win this total war. So they made them so that men from 18 to 50 actually had to go register for this draft. And if you didn't register, you would have been punished at this point in time. So I know it says all males ages 21 to 30, but eventually during the war, they really did make it so that all men up to 50 had to go register. Why do they call it a lottery? Also, let's look at that. It's really crazy. It reminds me of the Hunger Games, but this is actually how they would pick people at the beginning, where they were like, okay, now we're about to choose who's actually going to have to go to war. Let me grab it out of this fishbowl and see who's going. So it made it so much different. It kind of a crazy thing for them, but this military lottery made it so that people had to go to war, and no matter what, you had to fight if you got drawn for this lottery. Obviously not the most willing soldiers that you're ever going to have if you have a draft. We start seeing draft dodging already at this point in time, where people actually leave the draft because they don't want to go to war. But pretty crazy. Man, could you imagine just like watching these people draw these numbers out of the lottery, and hopefully you weren't one of them? Kind of a crazy thing. I know we talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I just wanted to reemphasize it. Propaganda was going to play a huge role in what was going on in the home front. So propaganda helped maintain the support of the people. So it not only helped maintain the support of like people joining the military, but the people at home being like, oh, we're doing this for the right reason. So it was like about citizens doing their part. A lot of this propaganda portrayed like you regretting not going to war, or it portrayed the enemy as like super savages, or it's going to portray a lot of like really bad things that are happening in the United States or in the country at the time. And it's going to make it seem like, okay, we are doing this for the right reason. So on these ones here, you can see how they're really portraying the other countries as savages and brutes, and like showing this Lusitania's being sunk in this middle one. Just like bolstering people to think that they're in the war for the right reason. So this really does help keep support within the country. They're also going to control the media at this point. So this is kind of a iffy thing. Like, do you control the media during wartime so that people still support the war? I mean, nowadays I think we would think otherwise, but at this point in time, they were just wanting this war to be over with and wanting more people to join so that they could win the war. And I think to do that, controlling the media might have been necessary. So women, obviously a lot of their propaganda and everything has to do with women, which we'll get to, but this is actually for rationing. So it's talking about creating your own farms, not buying meat and just buying fish. So the rationing programs allowed the country to have a better front line, and because resources became super scarce. Wheat became scarce, meat became scarce, vegetables became scarce. Anything that you really needed, like coal, became very scarce because they needed it for this full war. So when you have a country that's in this mentality of having a total war, you are going to have to ration what you have because it needs to go to those front lines. So they actually started giving citizens tickets to buy food so that they only could have a certain amount of food. So planting gardens and creating your own food became not only recommended, but almost necessary for these citizens to actually survive. So pretty interesting. So this is for wheat over on the right and left hand side, and in the middle it's talking about not using all of your coal and how to properly use your coal so that you don't use as much. So down in the description below, this one for Uncle Sam needs that extra shovelful. It actually gives how you can decrease the amount of coal that you use in your fire. So finally, we're going to get to women and the part of war. So I think this goes hand in hand with our discussion this week. So I think definitely check out the discussion post because it really does go hand in hand. But women's roles vastly changed during World War I. Women had to replace men in these heavy industries and munition factories. And this type of work wasn't seen as proper work for women, but it was a solution that was necessary, and it really gave women the chance to shine for the first time. Women became these heavy workers, they became nurses, they became clerks, they became drivers. They worked side by side in the military also with the men so that they could help support them. If your man went to work, it was only proper for you to actually go and volunteer in this society at this point in time. So women were going out, they were becoming what they could be and showing the rest of the world, like working side by side with men and showing that they were just as capable and sometimes more capable than the men were at certain jobs. So honestly, this is going to really help when women do push for women's rights. And the civil rights movement too, at this point in time, like this is really the first time that women are going to show that they are capable of way more than what men had given them, kudos for. So here's a few more things that women were doing. So women were clerks and nurses. They were engineering planes and bombs, and they were doing all the heavy work that the men were doing before. So really interesting that they were really the heroes here when it came to infrastructure and actually getting the soldiers things that they needed to survive. So the last thing I really want to talk about is financing the war. Fighting World War I required the government to raise billions of dollars. So new government agencies were created to manage the war, to draft soldiers, to make military contracts with these companies. Obviously, these corporations or these factories that they were taking over weren't set up for war. So the government actually had to come in and be like, this is a munitions plant now. Here's everything you need to be a munitions plant. And they would have to supply that. That gets super duper duper expensive. So what they started doing is giving out bonds, and they started like making it so that people gave their money now and then they would pay them back later. So a lot of it was like on a donation basis too, where you could donate money to the cause, but bonds were probably the most prevalent out of the ways to raise money. So here's a few pictures for bonds. These Liberty bonds, how they actually work is you would give, say $10 to this bond, and they would say, okay, in 5 years or in 10 years, I'll pay you $15, which is a pretty decent increase on that one. Obviously, it wouldn't be a 50% increase. If you see this one, it was a 4.5% increase on their money after they got their voucher back. But it really did help bolster the war and help fuel the war. So this was what was going on at the home front for them. Go ahead and answer the question that is with this video. And I hope you guys learned a little bit today. I hope this helps you with your discussion. Really think about like women's role in the other wars and who would be left behind if we did draft women to help with that effort to be the keepers of the home front. Like, do we really want to leave that to the men to do? Or should we have the women go to war and some men stay back, or do like a 50-50 draft? Just stuff to think about when you're doing that discussion post for this week. So I hope you guys had a great day, and I hope that you're having a really good week. I miss seeing all of you guys. It's crazy that the rest of the semester is this way. But like I keep on saying to a lot of people, I'm so glad that most of you guys are juniors or even sophomores so that I'll get to see you again next year. But I hope you enjoyed the video and have a great one. Peace.